Hey guys, welcome back to the Real Southern Garden. I'm Sarah, and today I'm going to share with you my top 3 favorite roses to grow in the South. So I used to work at an online rose nursery, and I've talked to people all over the United States, literally thousands of rose growers, and the consensus is pretty clear. They all said the same thing too. There are a couple standout varieties that just do really well, and I'm always trialing new ones to see which ones just grow really well and deal with our humidity and our heat and all the pest pressure and just everything that we have here in the deep South. It's like Survivor for roses, I tell people. I mean, it really, really is. But if you're like me, I love roses. I love rose gardens. I don't care how hard it is. I just keep on going, pick the best varieties and keep building on it. And then if you pick the best varieties for your area, it's really not hard at all. Roses are pretty easy care plants. So I'm going to share my top 3 with you today, and I'm always adding to that list, of course, but there are 3 that are just awesome. I know some people are new to the rose world, so wanted to just talk a little bit about bare root roses versus roses that are already grown in a container. My personal favorites are the ones that are already in containers that have canes coming out of the container and they're growing. I get them after my frost date has already passed. I don't have to overwinter them or deal with them when I buy them new like that. And those are my favorite ones to grow. I know some people love bare root. They actually come delivered to you as a root, and to each their own. If that's what you love as a gardener, then go ahead. But I like to do the other way. And the other thing is, of course, there's grafted roses and roses that are grown on their own root, which is different than the word bare root, but grown on their own root. That means they're going to stay true to the variety that they are. The grafted ones are going to be a variety of rose that's grafted onto a rootstock of something else, like Dr. Huey, which is a red rose. The only trouble with that is sometimes you might spend hundreds or thousands of dollars on your rose garden and you have all these beautiful rose colors, but one day they all turn back to Dr. Huey and revert back to that rootstock, and you have just a giant red rose garden of Dr. Huey. So that can happen. I've heard of it happening. All right, guys, if you're going to rose garden, of course, you got to have the right gloves. And you wouldn't be surprised how many people I talked to when I worked at the rose nursery that did not wear the long elbow gloves. But these guys are what you need. This is my favorite kind, my favorite brand. I like these yellow ones because honestly, I can throw them down and run in the house. And they're easy to find in the grass because they're yellow, but they also come in this color too, like the gray and the blue, which is also really pretty. I'll link them in the description if you're interested, but they are hands down the best. I work around roses all the time. I work around in the other parts of my yard, poison ivy and everything else that you can imagine. And these are my go-to. They save my arms and my hands and everything else. So they're really great. So another thing I want to mention, I got these calls all the time at the rose nursery. People would say, Sarah, my rose does not look like the right variety. It's weird. It's blooming white or whatever. And what would happen is, when you buy these roses online, they are baby roses. They're only like a year to 18 months old. And so their first growing season, they often will bloom incorrectly. They won't have their correct strong scent yet. They will be maybe yellow and they're supposed to be orange when they bloom, but they bloom white or whatever the case may be. That's totally normal. Wait till the second growing season and they should look closer to their adult variety by then and be blooming right. Earth Angel is a rose that's notorious for that. It's like a beautiful peony kind of look, a really tight cupped rose. I've got 2 of her in my garden, and it took her to the 3rd growing season to really get that big, beautiful look to her. So that is just one example. Also, climate matters. If you live somewhere that's really hot, your roses, even if it's the same variety, they're going to look different than the ones that are grown in California or the Pacific Northwest or Colorado or whatever. Usually the hotter the area is, they're a little bit more washed out. And if it's a cooler zoned area, they usually have a little bit deeper of a color. Also, the petal count will be a little bit different sometimes. I had a lady that called one time complaining about Carefree Wonder, and she was growing it in the greater Atlanta area. And she said, Sarah, this is not the right rose. It just can't be right. And I'm like, it is. It's the right rose. You're just growing it where it's really hot. And the stock images online, of course, we're showing it somewhere much, much cooler. So that just happens. So always keep in mind that climate affects your rose, just like it affects people, right? We look different when we're probably somewhere that's really hot versus somewhere that's cooler. So just a little FYI. Tortoise roses are really, really great for people that grow roses in the South. They are bred in Germany, and out there they can't use any chemicals. The government does not let them. So when those roses come out here to the States, they're just a little bit tougher, and they put up with black spot and disease pressure, insect pressure, all that stuff a little bit better. Insect pressure, like sawflies, I don't have as much problem with those with tortoise roses because their leaves are really thick and leathery, so I just find that they do better. So that is just, of course, in general, there's always exceptions to every rule. I know a lot of people love the English roses and the David Austin roses. You can find some tortoise roses that look very similar, but for me, I've had a lot of trouble with the David Austins and growing those in the South. I mean, you can do it if you got your heart set on growing any plant. I say go for it. If it's zone appropriate, try it. But in general, the English roses are a little bit tougher to grow in the deep South. So, and what else? If you got deer, I have dogs now. I've got giant dogs, and having these dogs keep the deer off of my property, especially by the rose garden. Okay, they don't even come up here anymore. But before I had these giant dogs, I used to use Deer X mesh, and I still use it up on my big garden, which is a lot farther away, because the deer sometimes will snack up there, vegetables and that kind of stuff. But yeah, Deer X mesh, I would use that, and bamboo stakes. And I bought it all on Amazon, and I got these little clips with a specific barrel size that clip onto the bamboo stakes. They hold the deer mesh on the stakes, and I just made a barrier with the Deer X mesh, the bamboo stakes, and the clips all around my roses, and a deer would run up to it, touch it with their nose, and take off, and it worked really great. It was a cheap alternative. Instead of building a giant deer fence, it's thousands of dollars to do that. So if you need something that's cheap and easy, that is a great, great alternative. So I will link it as well. But let's get into this video, and let's talk about the top 3 roses to grow in the South.
Okay, so let's just go back in time a little bit to last spring. So this is a peach drift rose, and it doesn't make my top list, but I'm just showing you a little bit of how the rose garden looks when it's actually in full bloom. And this little picture here was from Mother's Day. I believe it was 2 years ago, and we were just starting to really plant the rose garden and get everything in. But coming up in first place, this is Belinda's Dream, and I have made a little video about her before. She is highly disease resistant, very, very little black spot, if any. And the other fabulous thing about her, she's super fragrant. She's a big bloom. She has great vase life. And on top of all of that, she is one of the only roses in my garden that will continue to bloom when it's in the 90s here in the greater Atlanta area. Most roses will just shut down and they don't bloom. They almost go dormant when it's really, really hot in the summertime. And this one doesn't. She was bred down in Texas. A professor, I believe, at Texas A&M came up with this rose, and she is just a standout. So she is my top pick for Southern gardens. One thing you'll find too is that the air temperature actually will affect the color of the rose, how deep the color is, as well as sometimes the petal count. They'll have a little bit more of a fuller petal count when it's cooler, and you'll see that coming up in my next example with my second favorite. This is Savannah Sunbelt, or Sunbelt Savannah. I see it listed different ways on different websites. Another one with a huge bloom, kind of a warm pink, and extremely disease resistant. And see how her bloom looks different here, how she has more of a fuller, more petally. Petally isn't a great way to describe it, but she's got a fuller petal count. And that's because that was taken when it was cooler. This is the same rose, but she looks drastically different depending on if we're in fall or spring or summer. But either way, she's a gorgeous bloom, highly disease resistant, doesn't have trouble with the black spot. She's a hybrid tea, but she's got a good shape to her and almost reminds me more of a shrub rose form. And coming up here, I guess third place, but I love her, is Blush Noisette. She is an old heirloom rose bred out of Charleston way back in the 1800s. And she is a stellar climber, no black spot for me, great scent, but a smaller bloom. This is another one of my favorites, but doesn't make the top 3, but Pinky Climbing Rose. You can see how little she was when I first planted her, and she grew so huge, so quick. And then another with honorable mention is Tatin or Tatin. This is a beautiful shrub rose. It's a cordis rose. And then of course this is a David Austin rose called Molyneux or Molyneux, not that disease resistant for me.
All right, guys, that is it. I hope that you found this video helpful. If you are a rose gardener like me, I love roses. Oh my goodness. And it's a little tougher to grow them in the deep south, but I'm gonna help you out. So stick with me, all right? If you like this video, if you'll subscribe and give us a thumbs up, we would appreciate it. And we will see you right back here next time at the Real Southern Garden. Bye, guys.